All right, Saints Nation, can't wait to get started. Here we go.
The New Orleans Saints have finally done it. They hired a head coach. 18 days past the last coaching hire, after a long and thorough and extensive process for the Saints, they got their guy and hired Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator and now head coach from the Eagles, Kellen Moore. Let's break down this coaching hire for the Saints. I'm excited about this. I know I'm a day late. I had school. I can't do anything about that. I had a video pre-recorded, scheduled, and then the news drops on my longest day of the week. Regardless, I appreciate all of you guys who understand that. And I appreciate you guys supporting me. Help support a college student. Subscribe, like the video. We're on our way to 10K this year. I would appreciate it if you would just subscribe. Help the channel out. It takes 5 seconds. It's free. 72% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed. Double check. And that's enough talking about that. Let's get into the coaching hire of Kellen Moore. The New Orleans Saints have officially hired Kellen Moore to be their next head coach after firing Dennis Allen back in October and having a long, extensive coaching search. And I think there's a lot of pros and cons to this hire. Let's just go over the cons real quick. One of them, I don't know how great of a leader he is. I don't know if he's a guy who can command a room, demand respect, demand details and perfection. From the sounds of it, though, he's a very detailed guy. He's obviously a very smart football coach. It's more so he's a good OC, good play caller, has a lot of details, but can he command a room? Can he demand respect from guys who aren't that much younger than him? He's 36. That's another con. He's a younger guy. That's also a good and a bad thing. But if the team is like 1-5, for example, can this guy look at Demario Davis and they're the same age and he can yell at him? Like, how is that going to be portrayed? How is that going to be received? I think those are some cons about this. But really, those were my only questions about Kellen Moore. How is he as a leader? Can he lead a group of guys? Does he have a plan to get them out of this? What are his ideas for quarterback? That kind of thing. And really things that we won't know until we obviously see him in action as the head coach. Pros. If you would have told us back in October or November that the Saints were going to hire a young, offensive-minded head coach who just won the Super Bowl, we would be thrilled. And Kellen Moore is that guy. 2, he's had success almost everywhere that he has been. Let me pull up this tweet right here if I can find it. But everywhere that Kellen Moore has been in OC, they have had success. And I think him bringing over his offensive system and scheme, he doesn't really have an offensive system or scheme. He builds upon what his players do well as opposed to making them do what he wants to do. So he doesn't have a West Coast or a Shanahan tree. He has a little bit of everything and then adds to what his players do well to make sure that they're being utilized to their full capacity. Here we are right here. Kellen Moore's offenses in Dallas 4 times, Chargers and Eagles. Top 10 in no huddle rate every year. Top 10 in neutral pace every year. I don't know what that means. Top 10 in offensive plays per game every year. So controlling the clock. That's how I take it. Controlling the clock, managing the game, running the ball. Top 10 in points per game 5 out of 6 years. Top 10 in yards per game 5 out of 6 years. And this says, full disclosure, 2 Dallas seasons considered healthy Dak games only. So yeah, there you go. When he has the starting quarterback, these are the numbers. So having the starting quarterback obviously matters. But I like it. I think, we gave Mickey Loomis in the front office a ton of crap because they were trying to go with continuity, giving DA a runway and all this stuff. And we thought they were going to hire someone that they're familiar with. And here they are hiring Kellen Moore, a guy who they absolutely had no idea about, had never met him before, to my knowledge, had no clue, has no ties to the Saints, and they hired him. And it just so happens to be he's a young, offensive-minded head coach who just won the Super Bowl and had a huge role in that. The head coach of the Eagles, Nick Sirianni, was asking him to stay and run it back. That is a good thing that the head coach wants him to stay. I think there is a lot of positives. I think there's definitely more positives on paper and in theory here than there are negatives and cons. But obviously, it's easier to be optimistic right now than it is pessimistic. I will say this, though. If the head coaching searches started after the Super Bowl, it would probably be Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, and Aaron Glenn and Kellen Moore tied for like 3 and 4. And the Saints were just one of the teams, I guess, patient enough to see it through and ended up hiring Kellen Moore. And I don't understand how you couldn't be excited about this. It's a completely new era of Saints football. No ties. It's the first big change, really culturally and football-wise, since the Sean Payton hire in 2006. I will say this too. We have to give Kellen more time. We can't expect great results immediately. We know that this roster is shit. Sorry for the language, but we know that this roster is old. They have no money to spend. Who knows what happens at quarterback? The players aren't that good. They're kind of stuck with some of these contracts. We have to give this guy probably a year, maybe 2 years before we can really judge how he is as a head coach. And plus, those 2 years are going to be time for him to grow as a head coach and realize what he's doing wrong and what he's doing right. But we do need to give him time. This is not like when Dennis Allen took over and he had a soon-to-be healthy Michael Thomas. He had Jameis Winston, who a lot of people had hopes for, Alvin Kamara in his younger days, Demario Davis and Cam Jordan, and they just signed Tyrann Mathieu, and they had Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk. The situations are very different. DA was for continuity. Kellen Moore is being brought in here to bring a new culture and establish winning again. But sometimes to get to a winning point, you need to kind of take a few steps back. Not necessarily lose, but this roster simply isn't ready for winning. And it's not a roster that is going to be competing for anything, I think, anytime soon. Who knows? Something could change. They have the best draft class of all time. Kellen Moore is the best coach of all time. And they go to the championship year one. Realistically, though, no, it's going to be a year and a half, 2 years before we probably see the true head coach in Kellen Moore. Look at Sean Payton. He got stuck in Denver, had to take about a year before he could really build things the way he wanted over there, before he could get rid of Justin Simmons and Jerry Jeudy and Russell Wilson. And then in year 2 for Sean Payton, he was able to bring in all of the players he wanted, get his guys, establish his culture. So we need to give him time to do that, establish what he wants to do, because this situation sucks. And in order for him to have success in the future and build something, he needs time and patience. And luckily, the Saints front office will give him time and patience. Now, the next steps after hiring Kellen Moore is going to be filling out the staff, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, the assistant coaches. These are things that need to be filled out. I'm sure all of you know, but Clint Kubiak was hired by the Seattle Seahawks to be their offensive coordinator. And some of you may have missed it, but Joe Woods, the Saints defensive coordinator who filled in for Dennis Allen, was hired by the Raiders. So the Saints lost them, but not really, because Kellen Moore was going to be bringing his own guys in anyway. But who are some potential offensive and defensive coordinators that Kellen Moore will be bringing in? So one potential offensive coordinator that he could be bringing over is Kevin Patullo. He's the Philadelphia Eagles associate head coach / passing game coordinator. He is expected to receive strong consideration for both the Eagles and Saints OC jobs. Nick Sirianni has leaned on him heavily the last 4 years in a variety of areas, and he also has developed a strong working relationship with Kellen Moore. So this is an option. I feel like this would be a strong candidate right here. Let's get this up. Sorry, I have multiple things. Ian Rappaport was on here talking about Doug Nussmeier. He's a guy who's been to every coordinator job Kellen Moore has been at. So he was in Dallas with him, he was with the Chargers with him, and then he was in Philly. So Doug Nussmeier is also the dad of LSU quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. Maybe there's some ties there. Maybe they end up drafting him next year when he's eligible to be drafted. He's another candidate for offensive coordinator, and Kellen Moore will be calling plays, but he needs an offensive coordinator to help him, design plays, watch film, scheme stuff up, the same way how Sean Payton had an offensive coordinator, even though he was calling plays. And then Brandon Staley has been a hot name for defensive coordinator. He was the Chargers head coach who hired Kellen Moore, and then that whole thing got all messed up. Bad head coach. I think he's a good defensive coordinator, though. Another option, rumor floating around at defensive coordinator for the Saints, who has been tied to Kellen Moore, is George Edwards. I believe he's the outside linebackers coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And One last thing, I think for the most part, it will be Brandon Staley. I like him as a defensive coordinator. I don't know if he's going to bring a 3-4 scheme or not, or stick with the 4-3, but I do believe he's like Dennis Allen. Terrible head coach, but a pretty solid, pretty good defensive coordinator. And here's why I brought this up. Moore was Staley's OC in LA in 2023. Staley coordinated the league's #1 defense as the Rams DC in 2020. Obviously, having Aaron Donald helps, having a good Rams roster helps. So again, we're going to have to give the staff time to build up the roster and get the players they want in there to do what they want to do offensively and defensively. But from the sounds of it, Brandon Staley will be the defensive coordinator. They're going to have to do interviews, Rooney Rule, and all this stuff. But it sounds like Nussmeier for OC and Brandon Staley for defensive coordinator. And then, of course, once they get that all figured out, then they're going to hire a QB coach, maybe Dan Orlovsky. There's a rumor going around that he's leaving TV to be Kellen Moore's QB coach. I'd kind of be intrigued by that. They also have to get the assistant coaches and all that stuff. But really, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and special teams coach are the 3 big ones. And then you kind of fill everything else out after that. Now, the other big decision that looms now for the Saints is quarterback. We have a whole video about it yesterday. We posted that talking about the future of Derek Carr. It was reported the Saints will make a decision about him in the upcoming weeks now that Kellen Moore is hired. I'm not going to go really too deep into it. It's a whole video about it posted yesterday, so go check that out if you want more depth and details. But now that Kellen Moore is hired, quarterback and the staff, those are the next 2 steps. What coordinators are you hiring? What coaches are you hiring? And what are you doing at the quarterback position? And the last thing I want to pull up is just kind of the thoughts of some players and what the reactions are, or what they were saying about Kellen Moore leading up into the search. I'm not going to say who it was, but I did ask a player on the Saints offense what he thought about Kellen Moore. He said he loves it, offensive-minded head coach, and he knows how to use his weapons. He likes it a lot. Let me pull up this one right here. Alontae Taylor, after the Super Bowl, was talking about Kellen Moore, tweeted this out: "We need Kellen Moore. Come on, we need 40 points every week." Alontae Taylor seemed to be on board. Then he went live to talk about it on Instagram.
You want to ship in your new place.
Championship in his new stadium, the Superdome.
In your new place. You hire as a defensive coordinator, he gotta come crazy. We trying to play all that, yo. Man, we ain't playing none of that soft stuff. Come on.
Alontae wants a very aggressive defensive coordinator from the looks of it. Brandon Staley, I don't know how aggressive he is, if he's a blitzing guy or a soft zone guy, whatever. But if you want an aggressive defense like the Eagles, you got to be able to draft Jalen Carter and get Josh Sweat and draft Travis Jordan, or that big dude's name, I can't remember his name, and get Zach Bond and draft Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Like, there's a long ways to go before the Saints will even have talent like the Eagles. And that's another thing too. We got to be patient with Kellen Moore. We can't expect greatness immediately because there's a big difference between the Eagles' offensive roster and the Saints' defensive roster. The Eagles have the better offensive line. They got the better quarterback. They have the best running back in all of football, maybe the best player in football. And they got better receivers and a better tight end. There's nothing on the Saints that is better than the Eagles offensively. So we have to give Kellen Moore time to build up this roster. Like I said earlier, there's a huge difference in the rosters.
Everybody screen recording this. I know y'all finna share it on all your little social media pages. Kellen Moore, we need the best DC you can find that's available. We trying to go to the ship. 40 points is crazy.
Alontae Taylor seemed pretty impressed by Kellen Moore's play calling. We had this little clip from RJ Okoa. Hope I said his name right. He got to talk with Chris Olave about Kellen Moore a little bit last week, a week and a half ago. Here's what he had to say.
It's always interesting to see the host city and the host team, whenever the Super Bowl gets there, because that team gets a little bit more attention just because all the media in the world is in that spot. And so that the Saints are now the last team looking for a head coach, it highlights that in a different way, especially because I know, again, you don't want to offer any strong opinion, but it could be Kellen Moore. And obviously he's coaching in this Super Bowl.
That's huge. I mean, I seen he's a candidate for the job. I've seen so many names as candidates, but just to have somebody that's reached the Super Bowl and a possibility to win it, to come in and be the next head coach is huge. So, like I said, I'm excited to see who's the next head coach, and I'm gonna be the best version of myself to try to help them win.
From the sounds of it, just Kellen Moore being in the Super Bowl is a huge bonus for the players, a guy who knows how to win and get there. And now he's the head coach, and obviously the players' goal is to win games and get to the Super Bowl. And Alontae Taylor got on board after seeing what he did in the Super Bowl. Chris Olave, I'm sure, is on board. And we even got Rashid Shaheed talking about it last week with NOF. Make sure you guys check them out as well. We're going to look at Rashid Shaheed, what he had to say. And then he had a little tweet about the hire, and then that will be the video.
You gonna be watching one of these offenses closely on Sunday?
Possibly, right? Wink, wink, wink.
Yeah. That's the right answer.
Yeah, we don't want to portray it like anyone's told you anything because we know they haven't. We know how careful they're being about but if you're doing your own research on Kellen Moore, what do you like about his offense?
Yeah.
This is what Rashid Shaheed has to say about Kellen Moore's offense. He had been studying it, looking at the offenses and seeing what they do well and how everyone would fit into it.
I felt like it's super spread out. I felt like he uses his athletes in a super dynamic. It's a lot of things that you got to key on as a defense that you might not expect. And he was a quarterback himself, so he's a genius, and there's a reason why he's being put up to be a head coach in this league.
He called him a genius. I think he is too. I think what makes him a genius is that he doesn't, have a set system. He has ideas and plays and a vague baseline and foundation, but then takes what his players do well and adds that to a system as opposed to making his players fit his system. He makes the system fit his players, and I think that's genius. And then this was the tweet Rashid Shaheed put out there, the fire emoji, and then the fleur-de-lis Saints symbol logo. Seems like the players are pretty excited to have their new head coach, Kellen Moore, a Super Bowl champion, and he's going to get ready to work with the Saints team and build up this roster this offseason. All right, that's all I got for this video. I appreciate you. Let me know down in the comments what you think of the hire. I'm excited to see what he does. It's going to be a busy upcoming weeks. Off-season free agents, draft coming up. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, and I'll catch you next time. Have a good one. Peace.